More than half of Americans believe that moving in together before tying the knot is a good idea. They believe that cohabitating before marriage and even before engagement oftentimes is a great way to prepare for a happy and successful marriage. Proof once again that a majority in agreement can actually be dead wrong. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you why cohabitation is a terrible idea if marriage is your long-term goal. That's today on RelationShots. Hey, welcome to RelationShots. If this is your first time hanging out with us, don't forget to download your free guide to intimacy below. This will help you evaluate 4 areas of intimacy in your relationship: spiritual, emotional, recreational, and physical, and give you some ideas on how you can be more intentional to increase your connection. So make sure you grab that before you get out of here today. All right, we're talking about cohabitation. And more couples are moving in together, cohabitating prior to marriage, believing that that is a good next step in their path towards getting married. And they do it for a variety of reasons. Some people want to test out the relationship before they get into marriage. Some see financial benefit and let's combine our finances instead of paying for 2 places. Some just want to actually spend more time together and feel like, man, being in separate places makes it harder for us to spend time together, makes it more difficult on the relationship. Others have kids and think, hey man, having some built-in parenting help would sure be a great idea as well. And all of those seem like perfectly logical reasons to move in together. But if your ultimate goal is a long-term, healthy, happy marriage that goes the distance, I think you might want to know what research actually has been showing for a number of years, and people have tried to say it's outdated only to do more research and come up with the same statistics at the end of the day. So here's what research has been telling us for decades about what cohabitation does or doesn't do for us as we try to move towards marriage. Cohabiting couples are less likely to marry, more likely to divorce if they marry. They reported lower marital satisfaction, dedication, and confidence in the relationship. They reported more negative communication. And if children are involved, they experience higher rates of child abuse when children are in the home. So that is what the statistics have been telling us for decades upon decades about what cohabitating does to a relationship with respect to whether or not they marry and stay married and what kind of marriage they experience down the road. That's what the research says. Now let me give you 3, what I would say are practical relational reasons for you not to cohabitate prior to marriage if your ultimate goal is to have a happy and fulfilling marriage. Reason number 1 is you are more likely to marry the wrong person. Think about it. A lot of people actually move in together. They slide into moving in together. They're not super intentional. It just kind of happens. They don't really have a plan. But the reality is, when you move in together, you start commingling a lot of things in life, right? Finances, assets, schedules. If you got kids, you start commingling parenting and all kinds of stuff in the way. And what happens is you end up in a relationship that becomes much more difficult to break up when you get to a place of realizing, I don't think this is the kind of person that I want to spend my entire life with. I don't think this is the kind of person I want to make a marriage commitment to. But there's a lot more at stake when you break up with someone you've been living with than when you just break up with somebody who has their own place. And so for a lot of people, they'll have a tendency to overlook red flags. They'll ignore stuff that they truly want in a relationship that they're not giving or getting. They will put up with stuff that they normally wouldn't put up with in a relationship because, well, we're already living together and my kids have gotten to know them, and they kind of look at that person as, my kids look at that person as a dad or a mom, and so that'll hurt them when I break up. And I've had talk after talk after talk with premarital couples doing premarital counseling who have already moved in together where there were some huge red flags and issues, but the hesitation to break off the relationship because it meant moving out now from being together, and what that was going to do, impact them financially, impact them, maybe having to move schools with their kids, all kinds of stuff come into play. And so you will have a greater tendency to end up marrying the wrong person when you decide to cohabitate first and start commingling a bunch of stuff that should be reserved for marriage, right? Because what we're now doing is we're giving marriage access and assets to somebody who has not made a marriage commitment, and that makes it more likely that we'll just stay in the relationship and probably end up marrying somebody we shouldn't marry. A second reason you should not cohabitate is because the foundation is not stable. Now, it may not be explicitly said, but it is implicitly felt, I promise you, by at least one or maybe both of the people involved in the relationship. Because some look at this idea of us moving in together as kind of the, quote, next step or next level of our relationship. But the reality of what it is actually saying is, I'm not sure or not willing to make a marriage commitment. I'm just stepping into this because I'm not willing to go all the way. So it's basically saying, I'm not fully committed. Now, you may not be saying that out loud. You may not be thinking that out loud, but you both know at any moment you've not made a marriage commitment. So at any moment, if somebody finds something better comes along, they'll bounce. Or if somebody decides that, I'm just not really feeling this anymore, they can bounce. And so there forever lives in this relationship like a low-grade fever of insecurity and instability, whether it's ever spoken about or talked about or not. And especially when one of you moves into the other person's place, either a home they own or a lease that has just their name on it, even more so, there's more insecurity and less commitment because it's not my place. So which means on my side, I can bounce whenever I want. It's the lease is on you, so I can roll whenever I want. Then the other person can also be like, well, this ain't your place, it's my place, right? And so we create this unstable foundation where there's always insecurity. There's always a little question of, if something better comes along, we can go ahead and move on down the road. And for that reason, you may never say it, but it exists and it's there, and it impacts both the quality of the relationship and our ability to create a relationship where we feel fully secure, fully trusting, because there has not been a full commitment called marriage made yet. A third reason you should not cohabitate is because it's really about lower standards and lower expectations, right? I would require less of another person to move in together than I would require of that person to say I'm marrying you, right? The qualities I'm looking for, the character I'm looking for, the things I'm looking for in a relationship that I'm saying to myself, this is the person I'm committing till death do us part, and I stand at the altar and make a vow. The expectations and standards of that person are going to be much higher than somebody I go, we're just moving in together. Now my bar has been significantly lowered because I'm like, that may not be there, but I'm not marrying him. Well, I would probably expect this in a relationship. I'm not marrying him yet. And so you're going to get into that relationship. And then at some point, if you do decide you want to get married, you're going to want to raise the standard and expectation. And that other person may not be able to rise to it. That other person also may go, hey, hold on. You never asked for this before. You never mentioned this before. This is now not fair to me. If you'd have told me that you needed and expected these things before, I could have easily told you, I'm not your guy, I'm not your girl, let me step out of the relationship. But because you had lowered your standards and expectations of what is required to move in, and then you decide at some point that we want to marry and you raise that, now the other person's going, that's not really what was going on. And oftentimes this idea of moving in, if we've not clearly communicated, if we don't have great communication around expectations and next steps and what we're doing, one of the people may be seeing it as basically an engagement, a step towards marriage, and the other one may just be seeing it as this is still part of the dating process where I'm evaluating whether this is the kind of person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And so we often have different expectations going into cohabitating than we do when we go into marriage. It's pretty clear the expectation. I'm saying I do for life, you're saying I do for life, and we're saying we're making this commitment for life. When we step into a cohabitation relationship, one may be thinking this is the next step towards marriage. The other may be going, this is just part of the evaluative dating process. And once we discover that it's either good or not, we'll make a decision based on that. So not only does the research continue to show, take all your feelings out, take all the exceptions of people, well, I know so-and-so and they did before and they're super happy, and I know so-and-so over here and they didn't and now they're divorced. Okay, we can always find exceptions to the rule. But when statistics continue to show that if you cohabitate, you are less likely to marry, you have a higher divorce rate if you do marry, you report lower relationship and marital satisfaction when you marry. So there's a lot of couples who don't divorce who cohabitated, but their reported level of satisfaction in the marriage or health of the marriage is much lower than couples who didn't. When the statistics continue to show you that this is not a good way to prepare for marriage, you can either try to be the exception or you can put some heed to what research and statistics continue to show. And then I've given you 3 reasons that I think it also causes problems in the relationship because we lower our standards and expectations. We've got this foundation of instability where we're sort of committed, but we're not fully committed. So there are a few reasons I believe you should reconsider this idea of cohabitation before marriage. And if you know you want to move towards marriage, get in some good premarital counseling. That will help you answer a lot of the questions that you think will be answered by moving in together, but will actually be answered in a better way through communication. You don't need to test it out. You need to have conversations about what it will look like and about what the expectations are and about what we want to do inside the relationship. That will give you just as much insight as living together with somebody and not actually having those conversations. So hopefully that was helpful to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. I'm sure there'll be some exceptions. I'm sure there'll be some pushback. But I also want you to consider that may not be the best way for you to get what you want if you ultimately want a lifelong marriage. I'll see you right back here next time on RelationShots.